My name is Templa and I teach people to sew. And if you're joining me today, it's likely you're trying to learn the anatomy of your sewing machine. This lesson will help you become familiar with the sewing machine, and then you can use that knowledge as you move into the next step, which is to thread the sewing machine. So the supplies you'll need for this lesson are your sewing machine and your machine manual if you have it. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I always kind of start on this side of the machine and kind of work my way around. So this is the hand wheel of the machine, and it basically controls the movement of the thread take-up lever. When this right here is the take-up lever right here. So if you see as I move my hand wheel, you move it towards you like this. So you see I'm moving it towards me. It's moving the take-up lever up and down. Let's see, so then if we move from the hand wheel over to this little thing here, this is your bobbin winder. It's the sewing machine part that loads the thread from the larger spool right here to a smaller spool, which looks like this right here. Hopefully you can see that. That's the bobbin. And you put the bobbin on this bobbin winder, and then you move your bobbin winder to the right and it'll engage. And when you're ready to disengage, you move it back to the left. And mine, when I wind my bobbin, it actually gets some resistance to it and it'll actually automatically stop. All right, so if we move around, this is your spool holder. So this holds your thread, spool of thread, and this is just the cap that keeps that on there. And we move around here and we have the thread guide. So the thread guide basically just guides the thread. That's exactly what it does. I'm gonna pull the thread out here so you can see what it does. Now I'm really fortunate on my machine. It has some diagrams that kind of help me know what to do and what order to follow when I'm threading my machine, but your machine may or may not, so use the pictures if you have them, and if you don't have the little pictures, make sure you have your sewing machine manual. The next piece, so this is the thread tension controller, and I usually keep mine on A for automatic, but it can be moved to lower numbers or higher numbers, just like that. And the higher the number, the higher the tension, and the lower the number, the lower the tension. And what this does is it helps balance, and it keeps the balance between the needle and the bobbin to make sure that your machine is stitching properly. So sometimes if your machine isn't stitching properly, then it might have something to do with the tension. Okay, so like I said before, this is your take-up lever, and it's just a lever that controls the flow of the needle through the machine. Like I said, it goes up and down. On my machine, I'm actually fortunate enough to have a speed controller. So the speed controller is a slide or a switch or a dial that allows you to adjust the maximum speed of your machine. So let me talk a little bit about speed of the machine. I'm going to talk a little bit about the speed of your machine. So I'm going to pull this little thing up here so you can see it. Look at that. So this is the foot pedal, and your foot pedal attaches to the side of your machine. So mine attaches, I'll show you. Mine attaches over here, and then this is my power cord, and then that's my foot pedal. Around to me. Hopefully you can hear me. So the foot pedal is what controls the speed of your machine. Can you see me? The speed of your machine, and it just regulates this. It regulates the machine speed, and so the harder you push down the pedal, the faster the machine goes. So some machines, a lot of the beginner machines, only have the one speed. So mine has multiple speeds. So that's all I was alluding to there. I'm going to flip you back. On my machine, mine is, an electronic machine, but every machine should have a stitch selector. And the stitch selector is what allows you to switch from, say, the straight stitch to a buttonhole to zigzag, and then mine have all these decorative stitches on mine. But your stitch selector lets you go from type to type. So in my case, mine's one is a straight stitch, and if I want to move to a different type of stitch, then I just push my buttons, and then I can go up and down to select my stitches. Okay, and with the stitch selector underneath that, and mine is showing it with this little zigzag. Sometimes you'll see them up here, they're little wheels, but they actually do stitch width, and that just controls the width of the stitch. So for instance, if you're doing a zigzag stitch, it will make your zigzag stitch either expand or contract depending on how high or low you have your stitch selector. So that's mine, and I can just, mine will let me go up and down like that. And then the other item you'll have, and a lot of times it's a dial, is the stitch length, and that controls the length of the stitches. So how long or how short the straight stitch is, or the other type of stitch that you select, it will lengthen or shorten that stitch. And so for instance, if you want to do machine basting, you would change the stitch length to the highest length. In my case, it's a 5, and you can do machine basting. All right, so let's see, we've talked about a hand wheel, the bobbin winder, the spool holder, the thread guide, the tension disc, the take-up lever, the speed controller. If most machines have a reverse on them, a reverse stitch, and that's here. And so that will allow the machine to back up. Let's see if I can do this, it'll help. Hopefully that light will not blind you there. And in my case, I hold mine down. Sometimes they're maybe located in this area of your machine, and you push it down with your finger like a little lever. So that will allow you to do a back stitch and a front stitch to lock your stitching in place. Let's see. Then when we get down in here, this is your needle clamp. And this is usually on my machine, I keep it hand tight. And usually when I'm doing this face-to-face, this is where I let the student take over. But basically what you want to do is you can use that little clamp to release your needle. And your needle should fit in your machine one way. I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's a flat side and a round side. And the flat side usually goes to the back, and you would just stick a new needle up in there's like a hole, and then you would tighten that needle clamp. And you can do it tight, and then it has that groove in there because a lot of times your machine comes with the screwdriver that can go in there and tighten that really, really tight. And the one thing I tell people is when you start a new project, the thing you want to do is change your needle. And I am notorious, or was notorious, for not changing it, but I have since changed my ways, because it is really important that your machine or your needle match the type of project you're doing and is nice and sharp for when you start your next project. This is where you might get a little homework. So if you're at your machine and have an opportunity, practice undoing that screw and re-screwing it and taking in and out that needle so that you can make sure you know how to put in your needle. All right, so you may have seen me lift and lower this little thing here. Let me swing around back here so you can see it. So back here, you can see there's a lever here, and that's called the presser foot lever, excuse me, and it lifts and lowers this thing called the presser foot. So the presser foot is a changeable machine attachment. So for instance, I can drop mine off here with a button in the back. Sometimes there's a little lever that you can flip back there. And it holds the fabric flat against the feed area. This is the feed area. I'm gonna put this back on here real quick. Hopefully you can see all this. This is the feed area, but it holds the fabric flat against that feed area, and it works with the feed mechanism to make sure the fabric moves smoothly through the machine. And they have special presser feet for sewing buttons or zippers. So with that, I'm going to pull out, like, I don't know if your machine has this, but mine has this little compartment. And I'm going to pull out some accessories. So I always like people to have their accessories on hand. So I'm going to pull out a couple of things just to show you some examples of different presser feet. Here is a buttonhole presser foot. And this is a really neat attachment because you can put your button right in there in this little gadget that's sliding. And when you use that, it will measure the length of the button so that it knows how long to make the buttonhole. So that's pretty cool. You can see it right there. And then the other common attachment that people use, that is the zipper presser foot. And so that allows you to sew in zippers. So this is called the throat plate here. So the silver thing on mine, and a lot of times you'll see it has these markings on it, and the markings are, they let you see like whether you're at a 3/8 inch or 5/8 inch, what's called a seam allowance. Actually, one thing I was going to show you, because sometimes people, what you can do is there's actually a screw on that throat plate that you can undo. So I'm going to show you just so you know it can come out. See if I can get that out here. And this is also where I usually have people practice opening that up so you're not scared of your machine, right? The machine isn't scary. Let's see if I can get it out here. Okay, I got it. There you go. So now, if your machine has it, which most of the time they come with these, they have a little, it's a brush, that's right. Hey, if you're just joining, this is Templa, and I teach lessons for people to learn how to sew. I'll tell you a little bit. I'll go back over. We have a hand wheel. I've gone over the bobbin winder. I've gone over the spool of thread and the thread holder, the thread guide. This is a tension controller. This is my speed controller, but if you don't have that, you just rely on the foot pedal. Here's my selector for all of my stitches, and then I have a stitch width selector like this, and then I have a length selector, and a lot of times there'll be dials up at the top and on a lot of machines. And then this is your take-up lever, which holds the thread, and it's controlled by the hand wheel or the foot pedal. And then we've talked about the needle clamp and the needle, and then the foot pedal, and not foot pedal, excuse me, the presser foot. And I was just showing everybody how you can actually clean out the machine to get some of that lint out of there, especially if you do a lot of sewing or use a lot of cotton. You want to occasionally clean that out so that it doesn't bog down the machine. And a very good practice is to make sure that you take your machine in to get it serviced. And if you sew a lot, you're going to want to do that about once a year. All right, so my machine came with this really nifty thing. Sometimes they're screwdrivers, but this is just a little tool to help you tighten back that screw on your throat plate, or on your, if you can see it, there's a groove on my needle clamp right there. Oh, okay, this is good. So let's talk a little bit about what's inside here. So in this little cover, we talked a little bit about that bobbin. This is a bobbin. It's just a smaller plastic spool. And inside of here, that's where the bobbin goes. And I always tell everybody, when you once you get your thread on there, which it looks kind of like a P with a long stem on the left, you place that bobbin in there. So that's your bobbin holder. And you can't see it in there. So then there's this mechanism, and if you can see it, I don't know if you can tell it or not, but inside there it's moving around as I move the hand wheel. And so what that does is it catches the bobbin thread and works in concert with the upper thread to make your stitch. And so the track that the bobbin case moves through to allow the hook to catch that thread and travel that circular path. That's called a hook race. Some machines, like mine, have some extra gadgets. So here is a thread, a needle threader. So my needle threader just kind of pulls down there like that and engages, and I can just thread my needle without having to pull out the spectacles. The magnifying glass in this case is because the older I get, the less I can see as I'm sewing. And when we thread the needle, one thing we'll talk about is going from the front to the back, and the needle threader does that automatically. And then the other thing that most machines have, and mine has one too, is this little part right here, and that's actually a thread cutter. If you have any questions about particular parts of the machine, make sure you write them, or you can message me later and I'll try to answer them. One thing I'd like to encourage you to do is to like my Facebook page if you haven't already done so, and visit my website, stylishly-sew.com. Send out updates or offers and anything new that I'm doing, like this workshop. I would send out to that email list. So please join me at www.stylishly-sew.com. Please share me with your friends. Talk to you soon. Bye.